Welcome. I'm Joaquin Power, aka Uncle Kent, and this is my kitchen. The last few videos I've done have been kind of serious, talking about the coronavirus. We're not going to talk about that today at all. In fact, what I think we're going to talk about is something a little more lighthearted. A few of my favorite whiskeys and a few cigars I'm looking forward to smoking. But I'm not going to go into details about them today. And then I'm also going to tell you some stories. So I'm going to call this my whiskey storyteller episode. I'm a Conor McGregor fan, so this is proper 12, and you go to some bars and they act like this is crappy whiskey. Well, I beg to differ. I like Jameson. I'm not going to review whiskeys and rip into them and anything of that sort. I don't like to actually do any kind of review like that. I like to keep it positive and just talk about things I like. And I may in the future do something with some restaurants, some local restaurants around here and types of food that I like. But today I'm going to focus on 3 whiskeys. I'm going to start with Proper 12, and this is like on the cheaper end. And this big old bottle, man, was under $50 for a giant bottle like this. So we've had this for 3 years. Just kidding. I'm gonna pour a little bit of this, not too much. I don't drink too much and get kind of loopy in this episode, but this is Proper 12. Cheers to y'all. Take a little sip here. I like it. It's got like a vanilla flavor. I taste some robin eggs, a little bit of seashell. No, I'm just kidding. I've watched some whiskey reviews where they have the most absurd kinds of flavors that they're tasting in a whiskey. The vanilla part's true. It's a smooth whiskey. It's a good mixer, and it's also just a good plain drinker with ice or neat like this, which I'm enjoying today. First thing I want to do, since I'm dealing with Proper 12 and it's an Irish whiskey, I'm going to tell you a little story about my time in Ireland. I took some students to Europe a few years ago. This is quite a few years ago, maybe 2002, something like that. And I took kids to the mainland of Europe and went to a bunch of countries, and then I planned it so that afterwards I would send the other chaperone back to the States with the few kids that I had. I had about 5 kids. And then I was going to take a train from London through Wales to the coast and take a ferry across the Irish Sea into Ireland. And I was going to spend 9-10 days in Ireland. And that was super exciting for me, being able to do that. I'm going to tell you one particular story. It's a story of Liam. And I'd done all the reading, back then I was younger, and read up on types of things to expect in Ireland. One of those things that was kind of unusual is I was planning on renting a car, and I did, and driving on the other side of the car and the other side of the road was a task to begin. I'm not gonna lie, and I got used to it pretty quickly. And roundabouts as well, that was tough. And then the tiny roads, but there wasn't a lot of traffic. There weren't a lot of highways back when I went. I don't know what it's like now. I hope it hasn't changed too much. It was really beautiful experience, and highly recommend you just get in a car and drive that whole country. And that's literally what I did. But anyway, when I was driving on the Ring of Kerry, or towards the Ring of Kerry, and I went to so many cliffs, some in the tourist spots and others I just went like to just random cliffs where there's nobody and I'm walking by myself. Probably pretty stupid and dangerous. I did a lot of dangerous stuff on that trip. It was a solo trip, not by choice but by necessity. And but it was a good adventure. And so I'm driving towards the Ring of Kerry, and hitchhikers had been asking, putting their thumb out, asking to be picked up, and they said it was one of the last places on earth it was safe to pick up hitchers. And so I hadn't mustered up the courage, because I just thought of bringing somebody in and they start chewing on their fingers and acting crazy. I was just hesitant. Anyway, so I'm going towards the Ring of Kerry, and there's this guy, hitch him, he has his thumb out, and I drive by him, and I have nobody in the car, and I see this guy, and he, when I pass him, he's like this, he gets his hands up, and he puts his hands down, he looks really disgusted and mad, like, what's up, man, you got a car all by yourself? Why don't you pick me up, give me a ride? And so I felt bad, and I said, I gotta do it. So I went past him, I drove past him, and then I pulled off on the side of the road, And then I stopped and kind of reversed a little bit, and then I stopped, and then he saw me and saw what I was doing, so he ran up to the car, and he gets into the other side, which is weird for me, and he gets in, and he opens the door and hops in, and he tells me his name is Liam, and so I'm driving him to his house, or he said he just wanted to go up the road, and so I'm driving him up the road, and I was going to drop him off, and he told me that he hitched a ride to work every day and hitched a ride home. That's how he got to and from work, which was kind of odd and kind of crazy for me to think of that, because we're so used to having cars in America. So I gave him a ride, and he's just gonna have me drop him off at a spot and then hitch another ride to get to his house. And I said, hey man, I'm looking for some adventure, man. I'll just take you all the way to your house. He said, nah, you don't have to do that. And I said, no problem, man. Just looking for some stuff to do. I've got no schedule. And we start talking book. He worked on a fishing boat out on the Atlantic, like what you hear about, like those fishing shows. He did that for a summer and said it was crazy, and it was a good experience. And I told him about the perfect storm in the North Atlantic and how people often don't realize it's such stormy seas and volatile weather on those seas. And he says, yeah, no, I'd been there, and he had read the book as well. Talked a little bit of politics, talked about Irish views of America. And then as I'm driving him towards his house, I pull in his driveway, and it's just a little brick ranch house like you'd see in America. And then from his front door, you could look off over the road, and there are little mountains, not giant mountains, but little mountains. And then there was a school nearby, and his dad was a teacher, and I was a teacher. And so I dropped him off there, and he says, well, hey, least we can do is give you lunch. And I said, yeah, sure, you can do that. I'll take some lunch. So I go into his house, and he takes me through the little modest living room, into the kitchen. His mom proceeds to come out, and I meet his mom, and then I meet his little sister, and she's all bashful. They went on to make me a sandwich. I can't remember what the sandwich was, and it was a fun experience sitting around the kitchen table, much like we're doing here, but in another part of the world. And I ate my lunch, ate my sandwich, got a couple pictures with him, said see ya, and left and took off. And I just thought it was a fun little experience that all started with taking the risk of picking up a hitcher. And he wasn't deadly, he's just a normal guy. So that was a fun little story. I got a few others from Ireland that were kind of fun, but I don't want to overdo it in this video. Well, that's the first story. So this is, I'm still working on the Proper 12. Let me finish this one off. All right, next one I'm going to be working on is Basil Hayden. Basil Hayden is a bourbon, Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. And let me read, it says, when Basil Hayden Sr. began distilling his smooth bourbon here in 1796, Kentucky was but 4 years old and George Washington was president. It's possible when Lewis and Clark went out west, they took the Corps of Discovery to this adventure to explore the western part of what was the territories. Wasn't the United States yet, but with the future of the United States. One of the most important things they took with them was ammo and whiskey. And I was thinking, you gotta be kidding me. If they had this particular brand of whiskey on that trip, it would have made that trip a whole lot better. So this is Basil Hayden, and I'm not particularly a bourbon guy, but I'm loving Basil Hayden. And that's a shout out to Justin Smith, Amanda's husband, and he's a big fan of this as well. I saw him post that. So this is Basil Hayden. Little cheers on this. I'm not going to worry about cleaning the palate, because you know what? I'm just a regular dude. It's all good to me. Oh yeah, there we go. Basil Hayden. I'm loving that. Next thing I want to do is go into a little story. Maybe it's a good time for break up with cigars. I'm not going to smoke any cigars right now, but I want to do a whole episode where I sit on my front porch, get out of the kitchen, because Carmen wouldn't let me smoke cigars in here. I'd get in some trouble for that. Kids wouldn't like it as well. But I want to talk to you about some cigars I had shipped to me in this whole situation that we're in. I'm not going to say the word. The Wharf Cigar Shop in Beaver Creek, Ohio. I called him up, see if they're open, because I'm empty, I don't have anything, and they're not open for business where you can go in, but he said that he would send me some. I love the cigar shop because they keep track of everything that you bought, because I can never remember these names, and I'm not like a cigar aficionado, but I do smoke good ones when I smoke them, because I don't smoke many in a year. And so if I'm gonna smoke them, I'm gonna smoke good ones. And I think I got some good ones this time. He had me on his computer what I had bought, and one of the first ones that he talked about was the Flor de las Antillas. That's this one right here. Kind of bring it up here so you can see a little bit. Those really good cigars you can get for $8-9. Really good cigars. So the second one I've smoked many times, and that is the Liga Privada. I'm a big fan. My son Patrick's a big fan of these, number 9. So that's a great cigar. I love that. And then the one I've never smoked before. These first two I've smoked before, and I don't remember what the first one is like, but it'll be good. I rarely smoke bad cigars from that place, because they have really helpful staff that help you to pick out good cigars. You don't have to know a lot, and they'll help to figure out what you like. The last one is the Davidoff Millennium. That's this one right here. You can see that. And this cigar, I haven't smoked it before. The guy said there's like the flavor of marshmallow and chocolate in it, and this is a higher price cigar. I'm not gonna lie, this is probably the most I've ever spent on a cigar. I don't smoke a lot, so I said, man, this is the time to splurge a little bit on that whole thing. That's a little cigar thing. I'm gonna do another episode that I'll deal with that. But right now, coming back to Basil Hayden. Let me take another sip of this. You know, I heard whiskey helps promote testosterone. Waking power. I'm trying to lay off the beer, drink a little bit of whiskey, not too much. Don't want to be a drunk, you know. Next part I'm going to talk to you guys, because I said it's whiskey storyteller. Next part I'm going to talk to you about is this idea of poetry. Are you kidding me? Waking Power, you got that cool name, you're going to start talking about poetry? Yeah, I'm going to start talking about poetry. Some people think poetry's dead. Poetry is not dead. As long as there's humans, there's poetry. As long as there's been humans in the past, there's poetry. There's still poetry. What do you think rappers are? They're poets. Some good. Run away fast as you can. Good, some not so good. A lot not so good. But they're still poets, rhyming words, crafting words and rhythms. Same thing humans have always been doing with language. I'm going to talk about poetry as a bigger thing than that. The poet, like in the old-fashioned sense, the artist, the muse on the shoulder whispering in the ear, that kind of poet. The storyteller. The old poems, some of the great old poems like the Odyssey, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, it wasn't written it was written in a narrative. It was a story. It was a story poem. And it didn't necessarily rhyme. It had other types of techniques that made it a poem. This age needs poets. We do. And why do we need poets? We need storytellers. We need people with imagination. And they're out there. They're out there. It's hard to find it on TV. It's hard to find in the movies. Every stinking movie is like a comic book movie. I don't want to see that. These action movies all about special effects, which is cool, you know. But people want stories. People want stories. They even want stories in fighting. You know, like when you watch UFC, they don't just want the fight. They want the story behind the fight. People like stories. And poetry is storytelling. And we need good storytelling. AMC had this great slogan, story matters, and Breaking Bad. Great series, great storytelling. But there's other stuff. We just watched a movie the other night, The Hollers, the guy from The Office, Krasinski, that guy. I think he directed the movie. Really, really good. Good comedy, kind of laughs all the way through, but also really good storytelling. You can still do it. So the age of storytelling's not over. It's not dead. Poetry's not dead. We're still going with it. So I want to tell you a synopsis, a quick, because I know a lot of people haven't read the story of Odysseus, the Odyssey, but I want to tell you that story in a nutshell. And it's one of the greatest stories ever told. It's a story about this character Odysseus. He was the king of Ithaca. He was in the Trojan War. And Homer was the writer of that story, and he also wrote the Iliad. And in the Iliad, it's the story of the Trojan War, and Odysseus is on the Achaean side, and he fights on that side, and all those things. And that whole story takes place. And then when it's done, everybody goes home, but Odysseus doesn't get the chance to go home for a while. And the reason why is he ticks off Poseidon. And in ticking off Poseidon, he was punished by the god of the sea. He was taken captive by Calypso the witch and held captive there against his will. But it was a really, really difficult captivity that he had, because Calypso was a smoking hot babe goddess who lived forever and promised and was in love with Odysseus. And what did Odysseus do every day? Every day he went down by the sea and he cried salt tears in front of the salt ocean because he missed his wife. He missed his island. He missed his home. He wanted to see the sun that he hadn't seen for many years. And Calypso promised him, oh, please stay here with me. I'll make you immortal. I'll let you live forever. Is your wife as beautiful as me? And Odysseus says wisely, no, she's not as beautiful as you. You're a goddess and you live forever, and your beauty never fades. But still, she's my wife. She's my wife. Ithaca is my home, and my house is my home. And I want to go to that, and there's nothing that can replace it. And so eventually Athena has mercy on him and tells Calypso she's got to build him a raft, and he gets a raft built for him. And he, make a long story short, has some stops along the way, eventually gets back to his island of Ithaca. There's suitors who have taken the hostage of the house. They're pursuing Penelope, his wife, because everyone thinks Odysseus is dead because he's been gone, 18 years, something, a really long time. His son Telemachus was a baby and is now a young man at his earliest stages. It's two stories. You got Odysseus' story trying to get home, and then there's Telemachus' story going from childhood into adulthood. Athena says, hey, there's two things you got to do if you want to be a man. First thing you have to do is get a ship. Get a ship together. And when you get that ship together, you have to go on a journey. And in going on that journey, you're going to go ask the stories about your father. And you're going to go to places and you get a crew and all this stuff, and you're going to tell them to tell you stories about your father. So if you want to become a man, you got to stand up to these suitors who are abusing your home and taking your property and using up your supplies. And then you're going to have to go out and find out about your father. You're going to have to go on a trip. You're going to have to be your own man. You're going to have to move. You're going to have to travel. He does, and he goes out and finds out about his father. And there's an important thing. If you want to become a man, you got to know where you came from. And that's what Telemachus starts to do. Once he finds out the things about his father, he goes back home. And when he goes back home, Odysseus had come home as well, but he went into a disguise. He reveals himself to Telemachus, his son, the swine herder. The nurse discovers who he is, and then he grabs him and says, you reveal my identity, and you'll be in big trouble, because there's a bunch of suitors there. They could overpower him. And then eventually reveals himself to his wife, and then he plans his plan of attack in order to get revenge on those guys that didn't show respect to him. And what they do is they line up a bunch of axes with holes in them, and they have a shooting contest with Odysseus's bow. And Odysseus, they had to string his bow and then shoot through those axes and hit a target. None of the suitors could do it because they couldn't measure up to the great man of Odysseus. And then eventually Telemachus says, well, give me a try. He gets the bow and he starts to string it together, and he's about to do it. Odysseus was going to shoot it, and at that point it was the signal to attack, and they take him by surprise. And so Odysseus says, hey, Telemachus can measure up to me. So he takes it, strings it, shoots it through there, bam, the battle takes place. And Odysseus and Telemachus get revenge, and they slaughter them all. Eventually the gods have to come in and put an end to the violence, because Odysseus wants to keep going. He's pretty ruthless. The Greek gods say, no, you got to stop. Well, that's not where the story ends. The story ends, and Odysseus, with his son, goes to see his father, who's very old. When he goes to see his father, his ancient father looks at Odysseus and he looks at his son, and he is pleased and he's happy and he's ready to go. And he's happy because he looks at his son and he looks at his son's son and he says they are rivals in courage. Rivals in courage. Great story. One of the greatest stories ever told. That kind of leads me into the last whiskey, and then the last story. I'm going to end this thing up. It's getting kind of long. That was Basil Hayden. The last one I'm going to do is a Scotch whiskey, and I'm a big fan of this. This is called the Balvenie. The Balvenie is a single malt Scotch whiskey, Caribbean cask, aged 14 years. This stuff is, I think, the smoothest Scotch out there. So Balvenie, Caribbean cask, 14 years. I'm going to try a little bit of that. And then a little cheers, y'all. I'm going to end this with a little, you hear about country singers and drinking songs. This is kind of like the same kind of thing. I'm drinking. Hopefully, man, you would have a glass with you and we can drink together virtually. You can hear some stories, some yarns I'm spinning. Songs, all kinds of drinking songs. Well, I had a really good night, we'll say during this quarantine. My sons of legal age and I were sitting around the table. We're having the best time ever. Just sitting there and drinking and telling stories and having a good time. The best times I've ever had partying really has been with family. Absolutely. The best time, because family has your back probably better than anyone. And when you're drinking and you're drinking too much, that's what you need, is you need family covering your back, and you don't drive. Get somebody sober to drive or call an Uber. Be smart. Come on, people. We were sitting around the table and we're drinking and just knocking them down and just laughing and just having so much fun, and it was just cracking me up. I just kind of sat back because I realized I'm not the only storyteller in my house. All of my sons are storytellers. They can just get going. And my wife is a storyteller too. Everybody in this house is a storyteller. But I just sat back and started to listen to them telling the stories. Afterwards, I wrote this poem. And this poem is kind of based on the story of Odysseus. And you guys know the story now, so now you can understand. I entitled the poem Rivals in Courage, and it's kind of a comical poem. Here's the poem, Rivals in Courage. Odysseus and Telemachus, legends of yore, were rivals in courage, young men and old, children of Athena, the axes and bow, the shot and the war, side by side, rivals in courage, like us, sitting around the kitchen table. Jameson and Guinnesses, shots and pints and empty cans, stacked like soldiers as we beat them down, spinning yarns like legends, 3, not 2, alphas all, sending out signals, and ladies come listening to primal voices, father and future fathers, tough men dreaming of raising tough children with fine and worthy women, laughter and love, faith in ourselves and each other, faith in our traditions, unapologetically, guided by St. Patrick, guided by St. Joseph, blood on blood on blood, family first, always, unapologetically, raising our descendants to be rivals in courage. And if you look behind me, I got St. Joseph, St. Patrick, got St. Michael over here protecting us because we're warriors, Viking power, warriors in the faith, warriors in truth. I hope you enjoyed this little episode on whiskey and storytelling, and blessings to you all, and cheers.